Hey, what's up, guys? It's Jordan with the Laundromat Resource Podcast. This is show 102, and I'm pumped you're here today because today we have back on the show by popular demand, Jason Foster, self-proclaimed mom and pop laundromat owner. And he's coming back because his last episode really just seemed to strike a chord with people. And so we brought him back on. He was super excited to come back on and share more of how he runs his mom and pop laundromat. And so we get into all kinds of things, from marketing as a mom and pop laundromat owner to community outreach, a whole bunch of stuff to help you improve your business, whether you have a mom and pop laundromat or you have a huge empire or you're trying to buy your first laundromat. So ton of good stuff in this episode today. I know you're going to love it. I got a bunch of notes that I took from this interview. So great stuff. Okay, so before we jump into it with him, let's get to today's fast lane. And the fast lane is, how can Laundromat Resource help put you on the fast lane towards success? Whatever that looks like for you. Maybe that's leaving your 9 to 5. Maybe that's just getting some passive income. Maybe that's escaping the rat race. Maybe that's, I don't know, put your kids through college, whatever it is, right? So today's fast lane is, you may or may not know that I've been doing consulting for laundromats for a couple of years now. I've done over 1,000 consulting calls now. And in fact, you can go read some of the reviews. I believe they're at laundromatresource.com/testimonials. Or review. I'm going to put a link to it in the show notes, which will be at laundromatresource.com/show 102. Or if you're on YouTube, you can look down below in the description and the link will be down there too. So you can go read a bunch. I think I have over 125 reviews that you can read there, and tons of really good feedback there. And the reason for that is because number one, of all the pain that I've gone through when I first got into this business, and the very expensive and painful lessons I learned. And number two, because I've been talking with you guys for years now. And so, you know, whether that's through consulting calls or whether that's through webinars, I do the weekly webinars, or just talking to you guys, you know, via email or on social media, or through just meeting with you guys at different events and stuff. So tons of great stuff there. Well, that's not necessarily the only part of this fast lane. Very exciting announcement is that coming on board on the consulting is Andrew Cunningham. You may remember him. I called him the Human Laundromat Encyclopedia. And speaking of very popular podcast guests, Andrew Cunningham is one of the most popular and reached out to guests out there. And he is super excited to come on board and offer his consulting services also. So you can find out how to book a call, or you can book a call with Andrew or me at laundromatresource.com/coaching. And again, I'll put that link in the show notes, laundromatresource.com/102, and on down below in YouTube. And also there's 2 more people that are coming on board, I believe, here pretty soon. Can't wait to announce who they are. I'm super excited, and they're super excited to help people. And the reason that I'm bringing more people on board is because there's just a huge need. So whether you're trying to get into this business for the first time and you need somebody to help walk you through deals, or if you're already in this business and you want to take your business to the next level, or maybe your business is struggling and you need to figure out a way to bring in more income. That is what those consulting services are for, both for me. That's why I started offering them, because I couldn't find that help when I was in serious trouble when I first bought my first laundromat, and I didn't know where to look. And so I wanted to make sure that was available to anybody else who needed it. So that's there, laundromatresource.com/coaching. Book a call with me. If you don't like me and you want nothing to do with me, you can book a call with Andrew now. No, but in all seriousness, he's got a ton of knowledge in this business. He'll be great. And there's going to be a couple more people that I think you're going to love and who could really help you wherever you're at in the process of this business, that are coming up pretty soon. So I'll announce them as soon as we finalize all the details on that. So cool. That's today's fast lane. And seriously, that is genuinely the best way to put you on a fast lane towards success. talking with people who have been there, who've done that, know what they're doing, and who've been doing it for a while. So laundromatresource.com/coaching. All right, let's jump into it with Jason Foster, self-proclaimed mom and pop laundromat owner, and glean some wisdom from him. Jason, how is it going? Awesome to have you back on the show. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great. It's good to be back, Jordan. It hasn't been that long, and I'm thrilled to share whatever info I can about the mom and pop perspective of the industry.
Yeah, it's awesome. Well, it's funny because, you came on the show. First of all, I didn't know you from Adam. Is that the same? Didn't know you from Adam. Really?
Probably.
When you came on the show and we had an awesome conversation. Speaking of which, if you haven't listened to the first episode with Jason yet, that is laundromatresource.com/show 92. That link will be in the show notes and in the description down below if you're on YouTube. So make sure you go check that one out. It's got really good feedback all over the place. I know I've been hearing good stuff. I think you said people have been reaching out to you also. Yeah.
Yeah. I've had some people reach out to me, ask me about, various components of that podcast. A big one was PayRange and payment solutions in terms of credit card capabilities in a blend format for customers. And it's been really popular since I was on last time. Actually, I didn't have it installed on my dryers, and I said it was coming, and it's been on my dryers now for a couple months. And not only has it made me more money with the dryers, but my customers are like, yeah, thank God I don't have to deal with quarters, because they didn't with the washing machines. And it was kind of silly that they had to with the dryers until I was able to wire them into the control panels and do all that. But yeah, it's been great.
Yeah. Well, maybe we can get into some of the details of that and how that has, everybody's ears got to be perking up when you're like, yeah, I made more money. Okay. Like, we got to hear more about that. Right. And how that's working out. So we'll jump into that real quick. Can you just give us a quick overview of who you are within the context of the laundromat business? Like, how long have you been in it? What do you own? Those kind of details.
Sure. So I'm currently still in the same place, Western Massachusetts, about 90 miles west of Boston, town called Northampton. And I've been the owner of this laundromat, and it's the only laundromat that I own. It's about 1,000 square feet. I've been the owner for about 3.5 years. And when I took over, revenue is up significantly from when I first took over, just from doing a couple simple things, customer service being one of the biggest pieces, maintaining the equipment, putting in a couple new pieces of equipment, not like break the bank investment. And things have just been going in the right direction since I took over 3.5 years ago.
Well, maybe
it is the only laundromat that I own.
Well, maybe we can start there. Because I think a lot of people. Well, and I see this trend, right, where larger laundromats are coming in. People are advocating brand new everything all the time, and it ends up, being big bucks. And on the one hand, I think that there's some good that comes out of that, both for the community and the industry as a whole, and also for the owner, as long as that's managed right. But what I also see is that can be kind of discouraging for, people who don't have $500,000 to drop on a laundromat. So, can we talk about like how have you gone about growing your revenue as 1,000 square foot laundromat owner?
All right. Well, there's a couple things. So first, I would say not only is it's challenging to come up with a lot of capital, but even if you have it, it's intimidating, because if you're not part of the laundromat industry, like, I wouldn't necessarily recommend just jumping in with $500,000 to find out if you can be successful, if you're any good at running a laundromat. And that's not what I did. I will say this isn't my first business. So I've owned multiple businesses throughout the years, but it is my first business in the laundromat industry. But there are ways that you can drive revenue. In the last podcast, I talked about Google and customer service and how to put yourself in front of Google and provide great customer service so that people want to give you good Google reviews, which for me, it's been a big driver of business. But there's other things that you can do that I'm just sort of tapping into, which is turn your laundromat into a community-oriented business. And I don't mean, you open your doors and suddenly you're giving out all these free things for people in the community. If you want to do that, you can. That's not what I do. But you can do things like, when I first took over, there was what I would call censored community bulletin board. And that is basically, I'm right in the city center. So I'm right downtown, and a lot of people come through the city flyering, meaning they want to announce if they're having an art show, they want to announce if they're going to be a certain band playing at a certain venue, whatever it is. Meditation, I always joke when someone comes in to poster and put something on the board, I always ask, is it dance, yoga, meditation? And usually it's one of those three categories. Or it could be, a clinic for people to learn a new skill, music lessons, whatever it is. And so when I first took over, I noticed that there were certain things, the previous owners would tell me, oh, I wouldn't let them post this because of their political views. And I thought, all right, I'm going to eliminate the censorship. Obviously, I don't want anything profound, in terms of like profanity and things that are illegal, but I'm not going to put my own political views into what I allow in the laundromat. And I want like this to be representative of the entire community. So whether it's, whatever their political perspective is, they can put it in the laundromat. And I mean, it's like every time that I'd be standing in a laundromat when I first took over, so many people would tell me, a lot of the customers, hey, thanks a lot for allowing us to poster in here. And my customers would also say, hey, this is great because I've got nothing to do for the next 30 minutes as I transfer my wash into the dryers. And I love that I can learn about all the things going on in the town and the community. So it was, of all the things that people would tell me, I would always hear, I love the fact that you have this community bulletin board because this is like the greatest resource in the town. We always know what's going on based on what's happening in the laundromat. And that you're nice enough to let anybody poster in here. And it's true that like people really, I used to hear that over and over and over. So I knew that that was a big pull for people coming into a laundromat. They're like, oh, this is community oriented. I love the fact that you like let people in the community share what they're doing. The other thing that you can do is I actually was approached by an art student and they organized an art show in my laundromat. And that has been a huge success in terms of just like awareness in the community. And there's artwork all over the walls. And I'm an unattended laundromat. So it's pretty interesting to me that I have art on the walls that I can't protect. They signed a simple like liability waiver and I haven't had one issue. The art show has been going on for a little less than a year and not one piece has been stolen or damaged or broken or anything. And I get comments very frequently now about, I love the fact that you have this art venue for people and artists in the local community. And it's not just, we're in the Smith College area. Smith College is associated with Northampton. And it's not just Smith students, even though that's whose art primarily is in the laundromat, but it's some of my customers have put pieces in the laundromat. And I tell anyone, like, if you're an artist and, people that walk around and I happen to be in there, I'm like, hey, if you're an artist and you'd like to have something in here, more than happy to put it up. And like, oh, that's fantastic. And they love it. So that's another way to build a little more community oriented space. And the other thing, like the last thing that we have that is definitely more community oriented is what I'd call like a community library, where it's basically free books. You can drop books off, you can take books, and people know, like I have people that come through regularly that do their wash and they'll bring a stack of 10 or 15 books that they've acquired. They drop them off and then they'll sort of rifle through what I have and they'll take whether it's magazines or whatever it is. And when you look at those three different components, they don't cost money. It's a little bit of time, but it's very, very community oriented and community driven. And people love this. They feel like there's a sense of community. It's not just a generic laundromat to them, but it feels like a little bit of a homey place for them to just feel like I belong here and I want to come back here because it's slightly different than the person that's 4 miles down the road that isn't doing these things. And it's a great marketing tool. Not to mention, when you have an art show, the local newspaper does an article about it. And before you know it, like you're gaining a little more momentum for people that didn't know about your laundromat or didn't know that you have a large comforter-sized machine, which somehow you managed to squeeze it into the newspaper article. So, it all adds up and it doesn't cost money. And it's not like you need to have a social media presence, which I recommend, but you can do these things without investing dollars. And it does lead to increased business.
Yeah, I think that's really awesome. And just
So if anybody wants to take a look, Jason actually sent me some pictures of his laundromat with, some art up on the wall. And there's a picture that has the bulletin board and all that stuff. So I'll put those on the show notes in case you want to go take a look at Jason's laundromat and see some of the cool art. Actually, some of the art's really, really good.
Yeah, actually, we have what I'm dubbing the first and only sock. I was calling it a sock museum. And then when we did the art show, I now called a sock gallery. So I'm sure every laundromat owner that's listening can appreciate the fact that you're probably getting, like I do, 2 to 3 socks every single day. Instead of putting them in a generic lost and found, which nobody really rifles through lost and found to find like old socks, I actually tag them up and I put them on a big 8-foot, I think it's 8 or 16 feet by 4 feet bulletin board. And I actually have socks hanging on my wall with a thumbtack of every sock that's left behind. And it's gotten so ridiculous that I have so many socks that I'm now very selective in the socks that I will display because I can be selective. I don't have to have just like black socks or white socks. I have the most colorful themed socks hanging on my wall. And the funny thing is, if I get 3 a day, maybe one is a good one out of those 3. I lose a few socks every week because people reclaim them. They're like, oh, that's my special cat sock that I love, and I didn't know where the other one was. And they take it off the wall, and then they'll take one of the socks that's near it, that's sitting on the table, and they'll put it up in its place. And so it's like it's this very funny interactive art that people think is hilarious. And I'm saying it's probably the only one of its kind in the entire, if not United States, world. And it's probably featured in several hundred Instagram selfies that people come in, they take a picture with it, and then they post it. So, it's like that's another thing. And that was my contribution to the art gallery, was just creating this art sort of out of socks. And it's visible for everybody to see and interact with.
Yeah. And again, that's free promotion there that you got too, when people are posting selfies with it and all that, which is great. You can see pictures of it on the pictures that Jason sent me. It's pretty funny. There's a lot. You can tell that you've been selective with the socks because they're all different colors and patterns and all that stuff. It's pretty funny.
I just a little funny story. I had a regular customer that comes in, and every time she'd come in, she'd comment, oh, I can't believe that Rolling Stone sock is still there. I love the Rolling Stones. And then it must have been a few weeks ago, she came in, I happened to be there, and she commented, and I went over to the board. I took that the Rolling Stone sock down. I gave it to her. And it was like, she's going to be the most loyal customer ever because now she has this, I don't know what she's going to do with one sock, but she has this Rolling Stone sock that she loves. And, she said she's always going to come here. She's never going to go anywhere else. I said, well, I think eventually you may go somewhere else if you move, but I appreciate the fact that, you enjoy that sock.
Yeah.
And by the way, with the other socks, so I still get 2 to 3 black socks that don't make it to the bulletin board. I probably have a big trash bag full of about 400 socks that I will be bringing to a local, shelter and donating. So they do get used. And, I think some people know that, and they like the fact that, I'm sort of helping the community in a way that, maybe I wouldn't otherwise do, but I have access to all these single socks that people can make pairs of that, it's at least it's not going to waste and it's going to good use.
Yeah. Can I ask you, how did you get started with the art gallery? Like, how did that even start?
So it's an interesting story, but basically I was approached. There's one of the Smith students that's studying ethnography. She created a podcast for Smith College. It's called Ethnography 413 or something like that. And she interviewed me. She called me out of the blue because she thought, I want to go to different businesses where it's a blend of the community. She's gone to taxi companies. She's gone to, mechanics. And she thought, a laundromat is the perfect cross-section of a community. And I happen to agree with her. I think it is. And so she called. She was really surprised that I answered the phone because she said she called 3 or 4 other laundromats and no one answered. And she called me, I answered. And before you knew it, we were doing she interviewed me, we did a podcast. And a few weeks later, she was texting a couple questions and we became, sort of friends. And she was like, listen, I'm thinking about, what do you think about an art show in your laundromat? And I thought, if you want to organize and help me, that's a fantastic idea. And she didn't know that I actually had, a portfolio when I was in high school. And I thought about art as, an architecture at one point in my youth. But in the end, I went a different direction. But I knew that there was a lot of talented art out there, but they have no place to display it. So when she was willing to organize, and she curated the show, and she organized all the students and different people from the community, I thought this is fantastic. So she's the one that organized it. We had a big opening night, and we had several hundred people coming through the Laundromat just for the opening night of the art show. And that was also a great way for people to really see the Laundromat for the first time, because in the community where I live, it's considered the Smith College neighborhood. These are families, they all have their own washing machines and dryers, but they don't have washing machines and dryers big enough to do comforters. And when they saw that we had machines big enough to handle comforters, like now I've seen some of these people and like, oh, and I love the fact that you're supporting the Smith, the artists and the local community. So it all ties into, what you're really putting out there for the public in your Laundromat. But so she organized it. And the funny thing is, in May, when some of the students graduated, I would say 60% of the art is now back in the hands of the artists, but she's already planning a new show for the fall, and we're going to curate it. And the other thing that she wants to organize is live music, because I have a perfect alcove in the front of the Laundromat with nice glass windows where, once in a while I do get an impromptu artist that comes in and plays a guitar while they're doing their wash, and someone else will start singing. And it's kind of cool. And I thought, wow, if we could organize like on the weekends to do this, that would be great. So she's the one that sort of drove this. And now I think she's planning on handing off the responsibilities, because she's graduating in 6 months. But this is something that I think Smith wants to build into their general sort of, student population. Like, hey, we can work with this local Laundromat and they'll display our art, which is great, because, and to see the faces of the artists when they're so proud to have their stuff displayed. And then their parents come into town for Parents Weekend, and like the whole family comes into the Laundromat. They take photos in front of the art, and it's it's nice to see. But it's just such a simple way of bringing a little more business into the Laundromat in a way that also helps build the community.
Yeah, and kind of helps shape the atmosphere too as well. So
right, it's a whole experience. It's a whole experience. So like, oh, it's not just a place to wash your clothes, but it's cool because I feel good that I'm part of the community, and this Laundromat's doing what they can to also be part of the community. And it doesn't cost anything. It's just an attitude and a feeling in your Laundromat.
Yeah, I love that, and I like the kind of community aspect. And one of the things I like about the community aspect of Laundromats, I mean, they're a very community oriented business, right? It's where the community gathers. One of the few places left, I think, that the community gathers, and, being able to sort of leverage that and really lean into it, like you have, and like some other people that we had on the podcast have, but there's a lot of different ways that you can do that. It could be something as simple as a sock wall in an art gallery. And it can be, all the way up to, doing free washes for the homeless, or, all those kinds of things where you're just really helping out the community. So you can do good, and it also does good for the business.
It's a great cross section of the community. And I have been in the Laundromat when there has been people worth hundreds of millions of dollars and homeless people 3 machines from each other. And, everybody at some point needs to use a Laundromat. Doesn't matter how much money you have. If your machine breaks, or you're in a situation where you just can't buy new clothes or whatever it is, but you'll end up with all cross sections of the entire community in a Laundromat. And even people that have machines, like, for example, my machine was broken 3 weeks ago. I had to use my own Laundromat for my own wash. And it's interesting because you get a different perspective of what the experience is when you're doing it yourself. Like just slightly, I remember I was opening each machine and like, oh, does that one have any kind of mildew smell? Like I was giving it a once over, like I've never given it a once over. And it's a good experience to use your own facilities once in a while, just to see what the customers go through. And, so now I actually modified, I do a slightly different clean piece on the machines, because I know that it's really important to not have any terrible, any mildew or anything in those machines. Because if I wouldn't do it, I don't want my customers to do it.
Yeah, that's totally why I do my laundry there. at my laundromat sometimes, and not because I let laundry pile up so much that I can't possibly get it all done in one day at my house. For sure, it's quality control. Absolutely.
I
Okay.
have to say, man, it was nice to be able to have 6 things done at once.
Oh gosh,
and
I
in
love
an
it.
hour
Yeah,
you're done. And
I
I
know.
actually, I sort of joke. I think my wife may have sabotaged my machine at home because she would hand me a pile, bags of clothes, and it would come back an hour and a half later, folded
Yeah.
and smelling great. And I was like, boy, this is some disincentive for her for me to get that machine fixed.
Yeah. It's not a good spot to be in. You're on dangerous ground at that point,
Yes.
to becoming the laundry person. So, awesome. Okay. So the other thing that you mentioned is, you're doing all this community outreach. You've, in the last episode that we did together, the last show we did together, you talked about some of the other free ways that you're promoting through Google My Business, through having a website that has, up-to-date information, stuff like that. Can we talk a little bit about on the maintenance side of things? Like, how are you handling maintenance? Do you have somebody who comes in regularly? Do you call when something's breaking down? Are you fixing stuff? How's that working out as a mom and pop owner?
Right. All right. So as a mom and pop, I will tell you my biggest concern before I bought this laundromat, which already had the equipment, was I don't know anything about how to fix any of this. I never thought I was mechanically inclined, and I had no interest in becoming mechanically inclined. I bought the laundromat 2019. When COVID hit, and all of a sudden I had a few machines go out, I thought, okay, I'll call the guy that I normally call. And well, during COVID, nobody would come and fix anything. So now I had a few weeks go by, and this door latch wasn't working, or the water valve was not working properly. So I had to basically take a few machines out of order. And when you only have 16 machines and 2 or 3 are out of order, you realize quickly that not only are other machines going to keep breaking, but if you don't figure something out, then you're going to basically have no place for people to wash their clothes. Mm-hmm. So then I just, out of frustration and necessity, I started Googling and through YouTube. I was like, all right, I described the problem, described the machine, and lo and behold, there's like 20 videos with the exact same problem. And it's basically a step-by-step on how to fix it. Next thing you know, I'm ordering these $20 parts. And I realized, after the first couple times I started fixing things, these things, the most common issues, whether it's a door lock or a water valve, or it's the rubber seal that keeps the water from escaping the machine, like those things are not that hard to fix. It only takes 15, 20 minutes. And once you know how to do it, it's like 5-10 minutes. So before you know it, I was fixing the machines. And I would say 80+% of the issues that occur, I'm able to fix in a matter of 15, 20 minutes. And like I said, it's a $20 or $30 part. You get it through eBay or whatever. And when it's something like a trunnion or the bearings or something major breaks that is a $600 to $800 issue, that's when I call somebody, or I decide maybe I should just replace the machine. And especially during COVID, like replacing a machine is so much more expensive than it used to be. And it may take 8 or 9 or 10 months to get the replacement, that it probably is worth it to fix it if the rest of the machine is in pretty good shape. So I would say 80+% of everything I'm fixing myself, and it's easy, and I know it's going to get fixed. And the minute it breaks, within 24 hours, I generally have the most common parts on hand and I fix it. If it's something that I don't know how to fix, like right now I have what turns out to be a bad control board on one of the machines. I've never done that before, but it's almost a little bit of fun to sort of figure out how to make that thing work. So just do the process of elimination. And, I probably put more hours into this than I should, but in the end, I'm expecting the fixed control board to come back. Maybe the whole thing will cost $100, but at least I know it's going to get fixed. And that one machine that's out will finally be back in order after a few weeks. But, I enjoy the challenge, and I realized these things aren't that hard. So yeah, you could call a mechanic or somebody to come in, but generally I've found they haven't been that reliable. Even, their intentions are, yeah, I'm going to show up at this time, but they don't. And then it takes 2 or 3 different phone calls. And then, before you know it, you're getting a bill for $400 to fix a door hinge that really takes 5 minutes. But, it's just the circumstances. So I try to fix everything that I can myself. I have gas dryers, so it's a little nerve-wracking when I deal with certain things with the dryers, but I've been able to fix a few things that aren't that complex. But the minute it starts dealing, you have to deal with the gas and all that, like I just call the pros and I don't want to mess it up and I don't want to be dealing with that. But for the most part, it's as intimidating as it felt when I first bought the laundromat. As long as you are patient and you're willing to like open up your mind to learning through YouTube, you'll be able to fix most stuff.
Yeah. That's good. I mean, because I think that there's, first of all, I hear all the time and I'll see just like comments from people on videos or articles or whatever that I've done. People are like, oh, you can't buy a laundromat. You can't make money because repairs are going to kill you. Right. Like they're going to be too much. And, I think part of that is a little bit of ignorance. Part of that is a little bit of the old school mindset. I mean, if you got 40-year-old machines, maintenance probably will kill you, kill your business along with, those machines. I think that's a little bit of it too. And, kind of the way that I've handled maintenance myself is I've had, up until COVID, I had a maintenance guy coming in on a schedule, and I've had that works, but it's expensive, right? And we kind of talked about this a little bit before we hit record, but there's a lot of these things, the marketing, the maintenance, all that stuff. There's this inverse relationship between time and money. Right. And so you can either throw money at a problem, whether that's marketing, maintenance, or whatever, or you can throw some time at the problem and fix it yourself and save yourself some money. But it's kind of this inverse relationship. Right. And so finding that balance, whether you're a mom and pop owner, a lot of times, if you're a mom and pop owner, you got a smaller store, you don't have, maybe your margins are good, but the overall bottom line isn't, you're not netting $15,000 a month or whatever. You got to, it makes more sense to put a little more time in and a little less money in, and vice versa. But you got to kind of find that balance.
Right. And now that it's been 3.5 years, I've sort of figured out what's worth my time and what's not worth my time. Right. Like if I know that I'm getting an error door lock issue, fine, I can replace that in 5 minutes and $20 later. But if it's, wow, I've never seen this error code and that seems a little scary and now water's gushing out of the machine, probably not worth my time to figure that out. Just unplug the machine and call the repair guy.
Yeah. And I treat it the same way now. I don't have, first of all, let me just back up a second. If anybody out there wants to partner up to create a maintenance company that can be, all we really have to do to succeed is have somebody who sort of understands maintenance and somebody who will answer the phone when people calls and people who will show up relatively within. Yeah, that's all it will take to become fabulously wealthy. So if anybody's interested in putting that together with me, let me know. But second of all, I mean, the way that I've handled it, since I don't have that kind of ongoing stuff anymore, is I have done a lot of similar things. Like if there's a drain issue, I know there's probably a bra underwire caught in the drain. And so I'll just pull the hose off and do it. And yeah, it takes me 5 minutes, and I've gotten criticism. Some people are like, don't waste your time doing that. Your time's more valuable. And while that might be true, if I'm waiting on a maintenance guy, it might be a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks that machine is going to be down for something I can fix in 5 minutes. And I'd just rather do it.
Not just that, it could take you 20 minutes just to get the maintenance person's schedule.
Absolutely. Oh yeah. Yeah. A lot of times it'll take me less. Yeah, absolutely. Right. Less time.
It's less time to fix it than it is to arrange for a maintenance person.
Yeah. 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 But I will say that, if you end up scaling, then, those bra underwires getting stuck in the drains start to add up a lot, and it makes more sense to probably put somebody in a rotation. But as a mom and pop owner, I mean, that makes all the sense in the world to me to, do the majority of the repairs, because more, like you said, the majority of the repairs are going to be relatively simple, easy to do. You can find how to do them. And even if you're not exactly sure, on the Laundromat Resource forums or on the Facebook groups, you can ask other owners, like, what's going on with the machine and how do I fix it? And a lot of times you can get a good answer for it. So it makes all the sense in the world to me.
And luckily, I mean, I'm lucky that most of my machines are identical, except for the 2 new ones that I have. But since all the other machines are identical, I know how to fix these machines, right? And luckily, 80% of the problems are exactly the same. It's always going to be 2 or 3 of the same things regularly. Every 6 months, you replace a door hinge or a water valve, and you're good for another 6 to 12 months. So it's not that hard once you learn the most common of the issues. But yeah, that was a very intimidating thing in buying a laundromat. It wasn't just, oh my God, am I going to make money? It's, what am I going to do when this breaks? Because even the maintenance people, there's been a lot of turnover just with people that are coming in to fix my machines. It's even when I thought I had a company that I could count on, next thing I knew, they were getting bought out, and now they no longer had the rights or the exclusivity to fix the machine. I have Speed Queen machines. They no longer, and I had to deal with a new company. And then, they got really busy because there was several months of build up where other people couldn't. And it was just like, it's so hard to find a good, reliable, whether it's a company, a distributor, an individual. It's just circumstances are always changing. And the one constant is I know how to fix most of this stuff. And so it's just easier, less stressful.
Absolutely. And the second constant will be that business that you and me, whoever you are out there, will be constant. I love it. Okay. I want to keep it rolling on the mom and pop side of things. I mean, I think that really resonates with a lot of people. And so I want to keep kind of talking about some of the mom and pop side of things because, like I've mentioned before, there's a lot of different ways to run this business. And, some people, their goal is to get, like Ross Dodds, who was on the podcast episode recently or on the podcast recently, he's got 10 plus laundromats. He's going to the moon, right? Some people just want to get in for some side income. Some people, want to get in small and then decide they want to get, there's a whole lot of ways that you can do it. Right. But I think majority of laundromat owners and the people who get into the business for the first time, at least start out as mom and pop owners. So I think that there's a lot to learn about that. But can we talk a little bit about numbers and how to think about numbers as a mom and pop owner?
Sure. I mean, there's, you have your revenue, your expenses, and then what's left over, if you're lucky, that the revenue outpaces the expenses. So there's so many different metrics to look at, but I think the easiest and the first would be your net revenue as a percent of your gross revenue. So, when I was first looking at laundromats, I was trying to get a sense for what is the net revenue, which really ultimately translates to your cash flow. How much money at the end of the day are you going to be taking home based on what your revenue is minus your expenses? And I think I read that the average is about 20-ish, 25% should be. So if you're doing $10,000 a month, $2,500 on average should be what you're bringing home as a profit. Now, there's going to be a lot of different factors that go into it impacting that. I know if you have a wash, dry, fold, and a self-service, your net revenue may be a little less just because you have labor and other things factored in that a self-service may not have. So I'm an unattended self-service laundromat, and I don't have a wash, dry, fold. So net revenue tends to be on the high end of that scale. But I would say if you're a mom and pop looking at buying, or if you're wondering how well you're doing, I would use that 20 to 25% net revenue as a metric to see if you're not at 20 to 25%, then there's something that probably should change in your own operations to get you to that point. There's an expense that's probably out of whack with what the rest of the industry is. Maybe it's your utilities. Maybe it's the rent that you're paying. Maybe it's the financing. There could be a lot of factors, but the other big piece, for me, the biggest expenses that I have are rent, number one. I'm in a very high, expensive price per square foot. And as much as I'd like to own the building owner won't sell it. So I'm stuck paying rent. And that's a big percent of my expense. But the one expense that's, I think probably everybody else, the second biggest expense is utilities. So that's going to be your water, your sewage, and your gas and your electric. And for me, I'm actually operating at a very efficient percentage of my, my net revenue, of my overall gross revenue. So my utilities tend to run, let's just round up to about 15%. And I believe industry-wide, it's closer to 20, 21, 22%. So I think part of it is attributed to the fact that my washing machines are all soft mount, which means they're on shock absorbers. And instead of spinning at 100 Gs per second, like most hard mount that are screwed right into the cement floor, I have a basement. I'm in an old New England town. And since there's a basement, I don't have the option of having hard mount machines. So my soft mount machines are spinning at 4 times what the hard mounts do. There's, I think it's 400 Gs per second. And so that means clothes are coming out a little more dry. So my gas usage in my dryers is a little more efficient because clothes are coming out a little more dry. So, and I have Energy Star on all my machines. So, my machines are only using 13 gallons of water per cycle. So there's things that are helping to bring my utility costs down. I don't think it's because the rate I'm paying for electricity or for gas is any lower than the rest of the United States. But I think it's just some of the equipment that I have, I just got lucky and it's a little more efficient. The other thing is my revenue may be slightly higher because it's not that I'm charging more for drying, but basically the average someone's spending on a dryer is over $2. So that helps increase my revenue, which means the rest of my expenses as a percent of my revenue tends to be lower. And that's just, I think in the industry, they call it the full dry cycle or whatever it's called. Instead, I'm using some signage and I'm encouraging people also with the app that I'm using for a credit card payment that I only give them an option of doing $2 and $1 increments. So I don't have 25 cents for people to just select a quarter in the dryers. So I think my revenue is probably a little higher than most in terms of the expenses as a percent of the revenue.
Yeah. And thank you for giving some, just kind of semi-concrete numbers too, with 15% of utilities. I mean, I think that's a goal a lot of people are shooting for, rent wise. I think a goal to shoot for is about 25%. People are going to creep over, especially, if you're in a competitive area, and obviously lower than that, even better. So, I mean, I think those are kind of some ballpark numbers to be shooting for. The other expense that you don't have much of, which is awesome. But if you're going to be an attended laundromat, usually labor is going to be your number one and rent's going to be number two and utilities number three, something like that. And if you're unattended, it's going to follow similar to Jason's pattern of, rent and then utilities are going to be number two instead of number three. So just to give people an idea of what that looks like.
And just for anyone that's out there that's considering buying, in terms of if you're thinking about rent, I will tell you rent in Northampton on average to be in a location where I am tends to be about $40 a square foot, which may sound low compared to a California price per square foot, but that's very, very high for a small New England town. So, if you're trying to assess, like, is it worth, I don't know what strip malls tend to charge on average across the country, but my sense is 40 to 45 a square foot is probably high for a laundromat.
Yeah.
So, as a metric, I'm not sure what the average is, but I'm going to guess it's probably closer to 20, 25 a square foot for the average, strip mall location, but I'm just totally guessing.
Yeah, no, I think that's probably close. I mean, that's just based off of me talking to people from around the country, so I always am trying to do the conversion because I always think about it a price per square foot per month because that's what the rent is. Right. And so I'm like, okay, 40, that's a little over like $3. Like, but yeah, I think probably that 20 to 25 is probably, which puts you at about $2 a square foot per month for the rent side of things. So that's helpful, I think, to give people a ballpark of what they should be looking for rent wise. And you can kind of back into, okay, if I'm looking to buy a 2,000 square foot, laundromat and I'm going to be paying $2 a square foot per month, right? For rent, that's going to put me at about 4,000 a month. And if I'm shooting for that 25%, rent to gross income ratio, that means I got to bring in at least 16 grand, right? A month. And so you can kind of back in there and assess sort of the performance of the laundromat a little bit based on the square footage and the price per foot. And again, that's going to be ballpark and very location dependent. But you can also go on a website like LoopNet and go, which is like a commercial Zillow basically. And you can go see what price per square foot other retail stores are renting out for in that area. And that can give you a little bit closer of a ballpark of what they're doing at your area. So,
right. Yeah. I mean, the other expense is going to be if you're financing, what I know that's not part of your, the net revenue, but that's still money that you have to pay and it's still going to factor in. I don't have that. So actually that's not true. I have a little bit of financing that I had the owner finance just so he kept, and I talked about this last podcast. So we had a little bit of skin in the game. And we have a great relationship and he's always on call if I ever need him. But, luckily I haven't really needed it in the last year or so, but he's, it definitely helped in the first year or so of owning a laundromat because my success was his success too. He wanted to make sure he was still getting paid. And, we were lucky it worked.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you put PayRange on the dryers and that makes all the sense in the world, right? Like I've heard other people raving like, why would you put a card system on your washers and not on your dryers? And people are using cards in one and coins in the other. And that's just so inconvenient and annoying. And, while that's true, sometimes you just got to do what you got to do. But did you plan on doing it in phases like that? Or is that how it worked out? What was the...
No. So because I couldn't really, when I asked PayRange, how do you install this and who installs it? They said, oh, it's really easy. They send you the equipment and then they show you a training video. Somehow it's never exactly as easy as anyone ever thinks, but I would have bought everything at once. And it's a very small investment per machine. Let's say it's, approximately 30 or 40 or $50 per machine. And then once you install it, the only other thing you're going to have is a per transaction percent. Let's just say it fluctuates between 3 and 4%. In some cases, it may be up to 5%, but you're going to pay that to a credit card either way. So it's not a big deal. But I would have installed everything at once, but I wanted to make sure it worked and I wanted to make sure I knew how to do it. It's much easier for me. It was easier on my washing machines because they're newer than my dryers. So the control panel, the machine, it was the known entity, and PayRange already had a very comprehensive step-by-step in how to install into the control board and how to program the machine so that everything worked. And honestly, it really wasn't a big deal. I hesitated with the dryers because, like I said, they're older and the control board was a little different. When I first called PayRange about the dryers, they said, no, I don't think those dryers are compatible because they hadn't actually gone through the process with these particular, and they're just normal ADC dryers, stacked dryers. But when I pushed a little bit, we realized, wait a minute, this control board is not much different than this one. So this harness will work and we can send you that. So it just took a little bit of time. But then I was a little intimidated with the install on the dryers because I had to do a little more than just plug. It was, I didn't have to cut any wires, but I had to get a little more involved with splicing two wires together. And I thought, oh no, if it doesn't work, then the whole dryer's not going to work because it ties right into the coin mechanism. And I only have, 12 dryers, and I didn't want to sort of sacrifice any one dryer at the expense of putting PayRange in. But eventually I felt confident, and luckily for me, my father's an engineer and he was visiting, and I said, all right, we are going to do this while you're here because you know a lot more about electronics and mechanics than I do. And I finally had the confidence, and before you knew it, we got the first couple dryers to work, and then we did the others. And it really wasn't that big of a deal once you do one. But that was the only hesitation. I just wanted to make sure I knew how to do it and that I had a little bit of a backup expertise that we could reverse whatever we did if it didn't work. It worked, and my customers are so much happier because, like you said, it's a little silly to be able to use credit card for washing machines, and it's like, I need coins for the dryers. Now I got to go break a $20. First, I have to get a $20 bill, then I have to stick it into the change machine, and now I'm stuck with $18 worth of quarters that I'm not going to use till the next time. So, but once I did, and I was very incented to put PayRange onto the dryers because I knew there was an opportunity to make more money. It's not that I charge more, but people that used to spend $1.50 for 30 minutes, so it's 25 cents for 5 minutes on my dryers, instead of them doing 30 minutes or 25 minutes, I only give them an option of swiping for a $2 cycle. So they're like, oh, $2? Boom. They just swipe with their finger right across their phone. And next thing you know, they have 40 minutes on their dryer. And they don't think twice about it. And I was standing there once and someone said, hey, is there an option to do less than $2? And I said, no, because there's a transaction fee. And honestly, it's like going to a generic supermarket or whatever other grocer. And, they sometimes have $10 minimums, $5 minimums. Like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And that was the whole conversation. And next thing you know, like my dryer revenue as a percent of my overall revenue increased, because instead of people spending $1.50, they're spending $2, and it doesn't bother them one iota. Not to mention their clothes are dry after 40 minutes. They don't have to maybe come back and put 25 more cents in. So it's been great because they're spending more. And for that person that wants to put 45 or 50 minutes on, now they're spending $3 because it's $2 or a $1 increment. So nobody only wants to put 20 minutes. They know they need more than 20 minutes. So they're doing $2 no matter what. And then if they need more time, it's like, oh, whatever, I'll just spend the extra $1, and they do it. And so now, just as a percent, it's a noticeable increase. Within the first week, I saw my dryer revenue go from the low to mid 40% to almost 50% of my wash revenue, just from this one thing. And it's not costing me anymore. Now, it's a win-win for everybody. PayRange is thrilled because now they're getting money, and my customers are happy because it's like they don't have to be bothered with cash, and I'm happy because maybe I'm making a little more money.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. Are there competitors in your area who are doing similar things, like a full cycle dry? How did you decide to do that? And how, are customers pushing back on that? Because I can go down the street and just pay the quarter or whatever.
If they are, they're not voicing their concerns to me. So, I think what I read is 90% of your customers are within a 1 mile radius of where they live. So there's a convenience factor. But I think my customers, I never thought about, are my customers going to be upset? Are they going to go somewhere else? Because I've always felt if a customer is going to get upset over 25 or 50 cents and threaten to go somewhere else because of it, I never really wanted them as a customer because they're just not that great of a customer. I'd rather deal with the person that can appreciate the fact that, wow, his machines work. It's convenient. I'm not stuck using an Amex or a Visa or a debit card. I can use Apple Pay. I can use Google Pay. I can use any form of payment that I want. Now that I've downloaded the app, it's so convenient, and I've already set up my account, which takes another 2 minutes. And once it's done, all I can do, I can add $5, I can add $10, I can add 20. So yeah, my competitors, they may offer a slightly different denomination of, or 25-cent increments, but my customers don't seem to be bothered by it. And I'm only seeing an increase in revenue and an increase in the number of people using the app. So clearly I think it's working. And whatever my competitors do, I don't care, because I know the value I'm providing for my customers. I think they appreciate the value. And when you tie that in with the community building and the community feeling in my laundromat, it's more than just, oh, I'm spending an extra 25 or 50 cents. They're like, I like this place. Like, I want to see it succeed. And it's interesting because I do get customers that thank me for keeping the laundromat open. They're like, oh, sometimes I get worried that this place may close, from previous owners or whatever. And I'm like, wow, I have customers thanking me to spend money in my establishment. Like, that's how you know something's working. And, if my competitors, I do know that there's somebody about 6 miles from me that does use PayRange, and they run a very professional laundromat, and I give them a lot of credit because they're fairly new owners. They've only owned it for a couple of years. And I was pleasantly surprised to find out that they use PayRange, but I think they're the only other ones. Otherwise, I think the nearest, I don't even think my closest competitor doesn't have any form of credit card payment that I'm aware of. Plus they have electric dryers, which really, customers don't love. But the other, my bigger competitor that's a couple miles away, they do take credit card, but they don't have the cool factor. And I will tell you, when you have an app, it's so much cooler for your under age 30 demographics. and even over the age of 50 demographics are like, oh yeah, wow, this is kind of cool. So again, it works for people. It's like modern technology that people are impressed with. They're like, wow, this place is really modernized. And all it is an app, right? And it took me, 5 minutes per machine to install the hardware. So, and again, I'm not getting paid by PayRange 1 cent, but if I were them, I would be paying me.
Yeah, no kidding. PayRange, step it up, guys. Come on. Yeah, no, I mean, I like that. And I think that, real quick, are you accepting only card now? Do you accept coins still or not at all?
Yes, I accept coins. And, it's interesting because I've heard people, in fact, I think Ross was saying that he only accepts card.
Uh-huh.
For me, like I said, I live down, my laundromat is in downtown Northampton, which means a lot of people that are living in Northampton, believe it or not, they're in the service industry. So they're waiters, waitresses, bartenders, whatever it is. And they're always used to dealing with tip money and cash. So there are definitely people that want to come in and use, the $4 they've acquired in quarters for the week or the 2 weeks. And sometimes they'll use credit card and their coins. But it was funny because I was talking to one of the customers that came in, and I know they always use cash. And I said, are you using cash because, you're a waiter or waitress and they're like, yes, but it also feels like I'm not really spending any money when I'm using my loose change. And I thought, why would I want to take that away? Like, it's not that big of a deal for me to have to collect quarters, and my trips to the bank are much less now that I've got. So what I read was when you put credit card capabilities in the best case scenario, you'll maybe get up to, if you're allowing a blend, meaning you accept cash and credit card, the best you'll see is maybe 50% cash, 50% credit card. Well, I'm already about 40+% in credit card. So I know that it's popular, but I really don't think it's ever going to go over 50% unless I stop taking cash. And I don't need to. I want my customers to feel comfortable to pay with whatever method they want to pay. And even those people that use cash, there are going to be times when they come in my laundromat and they forget their cash or they don't have the cash. And they're going to be like, oh, I'll just use the app. And once they download it, they're not going to go back to cash. Because my customers are saying, I love that I don't have to come in here with cash. So yeah, it does help build loyalty.
Well, it brings up a good point. You brought up Ross and how he's card only. And I think, again, it comes back to how do you want to run your business, right? And if you're going to be a mom and pop, you're going to own 1, maybe 2 laundromats. I think, in my personal opinion, hybrid makes all the sense in the world because, you give your customers the most options. If your goal is to have 10 plus, 15, 20, 30, 50, whatever, at some point you're going to have to be all card because it's just going to be cumbersome to try to collect coins. Somebody's full-time job is going to be collecting coins, right? And so I love that.
It's not just collecting coins. It's also making sure your change machines work. Those things, they are finicky. And I'll tell you, like, I've had to take those things apart and figure out some of how do you clean it? How do you recalibrate it? Especially when people are coming in on humid days with damp bills that sort of gunk up your reader. But so it's not just the collection, it's also making sure your change machines work, because there's nothing worse than people coming in with a $5, $10, $50, $20 bill and they can't get change.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's another scenario where it's nice to have the hybrid, right? Because if they can't get change, at least there's another payment option, for them. And vice versa. If PayRange goes down or something like that, there's another payment option for them. I know Ross, speaking of Ross, has been dealing with having some of the card readers down in one of his stores and not being able to get somebody out there. So, there's headaches, but, you got to kind of assess, like, what's your goals here? What are you trying to do? Who are you trying to reach? And then make the best decision for your particular scenario, like you've done, like Ross has done, and like so many of us are trying to do who own laundromats, right?
Right. And I try to let it, a good portion of it be driven by customers' preference. You definitely can train your customers, but you don't want to alienate them just because you stubbornly want to run a business a certain way. So for me, the blend is the best option, but I can understand if you had a lot of stores that, you just don't want to be dealing with coins.
Yeah. But I also think, I'm pretty sure Dave Menz, Laundromat Millionaire there, he's got not quite as many as Ross, but he's got a bunch, 5 or 6 laundromats, and he's hybrid too. He's got card and coin. So, I mean, you can own multiple and be both. So, awesome. Real quick. I wanted to ask you a question. Maybe this would be a good way for us to close it down unless you have more that you want to make sure that we get through. But now, being where you're at now and knowing all the things you know now about the business, if I was to strip away, your laundromat and say, okay, you got to do it all from scratch again, what would you do differently knowing what you know now?
I would love to replicate what I did. And it's not that I would change anything in what I did, but now I know how much I had no idea what I was getting into. And I got lucky, right? Because not only did I buy from an owner that was honest and told me he told me about the business and he was 100% correct in what he was saying, but I didn't realize that I had good machines that were in pretty good functioning working order. They were not, I wouldn't say new, but 5-6 years old when I took over. There's just a lot of stuff that could have been wrong and could have gone wrong that didn't. And so if I were to do it over again, I would have a lot more questions and a lot more diligence that I would do based on everything that I know now. And for me personally, I would love to find a laundromat that has bad Google reviews, which to me says huge opportunity to do something better, and that has been sort of run down a little bit because, again, I can deal with rundown, but I would probably in a next laundromat to avoid maintenance. Like, I'm always having to fix something once, twice a week, whatever it is, nothing major, but I would like to put in all new equipment because it'll minimize the maintenance, which means you could run it more as a passive income. I mean, you still have to provide good customer service and people have to be happy, but if your machines are new and your machines are working, people are going to be happy, right? As long as things are working, nobody's going into a laundromat trying to find things that don't work. Although sometimes I feel like I have a customer or two that does that. But for the most part, if your machines work and they're reliable, it's a great business. It's when you have water on the floor or someone puts their money in and it doesn't actually function the way it's supposed to, like that's when you have to deal with stuff. So it's not that I would change anything. It's just I know so much more now and the diligence would just be a different process. I'd be asking different questions about the revenue, about the expenses, and I would probably want to know a lot more about the machines and really what is the maintenance issues with the machines and which machines have a longer life than the others. Because I'm lucky that my machines are all functioning and they're well maintained. And so that's a big piece of the expense that I don't really have to invest in. But if I had to invest in all of that, I would rather just have new equipment and have a lot less headaches.
Yeah. I mean, and that makes a lot of sense to, and it is true. Well, to an extent. So a lot of time, every time I put in new equipment in one of my stores, you got the early problems that happen. I don't know. Maybe that's just my luck, but every time early on, but then once everything's running smoothly, you're right. A lot less of the maintenance headache, a lot happier customers. Nobody's at the laundromat casino putting their money in to see if the machine's going to work or not this time. And, all that stuff. Right. So that makes a lot of sense.
I was nervous with PayRange when I installed it because it's, I was taking a perfectly fine functioning coin mechanism and plugging into it and, and tapping into it. That if that didn't work, I had no way of taking money. And it wasn't just the dryers, it's also on the washing machines. But I have to say, maybe it's luck, maybe it's the quality of their product, but it worked. And the one time I had an issue on the very first 2 dryers that we installed, all I had to do was rewire it and it worked. We actually did it wrong the first couple times. Even though it would work, it wasn't as consistent. So, that was a big leap. But once you get those kinks worked out, it really, it was a reliable mechanism.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned you'd probably do your due diligence a little bit differently. You'd ask maybe some different questions about revenue and stuff. Like, do you have any examples of maybe like what you didn't ask that you would ask, or, oh, you know what I mean?
So one of the things that I asked was related to maintenance. And I said, how often do the machines break? And what they told me was, we have somebody come in once every 6 months to fix things, and it's totally fine. And I thought, oh, once every 6 months, that's no big deal, right? I had no idea that, yeah, they did that, but they had 5 machines out for 5 months of the year. And then, on the 6th month, they'd have somebody come in. And I said, well, how much does that cost? He said, oh, we'd pay them $500 under the table because they're not supposed to do it. They have this, they work for a distributor and they're sort of doing this on the side. And it just, that was not a very reliable way. And I must have made 20 phone calls to try to find, because when I called their particular person, he was like, oh, I don't do that anymore. I was like, oh, great. Now what do I do? Mm-hmm. And when I first took over, I think there were 4, maybe 5 machines that were out. And, I needed those machines to be up because I was already 20 or 30% of my machines that didn't work. So I would have been a lot more vigilant about understanding the maintenance and who can actually fix these and what the costs are involved with fixing the machines, and just knowing more about what are the most common issues that you're having. Because I learned grassroots that, this error means this. And then, I wish I'd known that right from the start, because I could have fixed 3 of those machines in a matter of an hour. If I had just known more about, so the maintenance and the equipment was something I didn't know much about. I had no idea until a few months ago that my machines were spinning at a much higher G-force because it was soft mount versus hard mount. So I didn't even know I was getting a good value in the machines when I took over. So I probably would have known a lot more about the equipment, not just the maintenance, but really what is the equipment that I'm getting. And based on this particular Speed Queen machine, I know what the depreciation life is of the machine, but what's the real life? Are you going to get 8 years, 10 years, 12 years? Like, I just would have known a lot more about the equipment because I knew nothing about it. And I just sort of thought, oh, if the machines are functioning now, they'll function, 10 years from now. I also would have probably understood more about the size of the equipment. They had nothing in the laundromat that could handle comforters or big loads. And I knew that that was an opportunity, but I had no idea just what kind of an opportunity. I didn't know how much a big machine would cost, right? So that was another piece. As it ends up now, I have 2 big machines, and now I know what they cost and I know what the return is on those, and the equation works. But I didn't know, what, maybe I should replace 4 of these broken machines with 2 big machines. And now I'm capturing a market I couldn't have captured. So there was just things that I didn't know in terms of what's the market, like where am I deficient in terms of what the capabilities of this laundromat are. And for the first couple of years, I had to send people to my competitors because I couldn't do comforters. And it sucks when they come in with 8 big bags of laundry, but if you can't do that one bag that's got the comforter in it, then they take all of that $20 or $30 worth of business somewhere else, and they'll never come back. Mm-hmm. And so when I got the big machines, that's the market I'm capturing, is no one's leaving now, or at least not that I'm aware of. So there's just the equipment, and I probably would have wanted to know, what is the growth potential? Like, nobody really knows the answer, like how much money can you make? But I went to one distributor conference, a few months ago, and I was talking to other laundromat owners. I would have talked to other laundromat owners as part of my diligence, which I didn't do at all. Partially because I thought, oh, if I start talking to them, they may realize there's a laundromat for sale, and maybe they'll grab it instead of me. But I always wanted to know, like, what is the revenue potential? What's my best case scenario? Am I going to make $2,000 a month? Is it $10,000 a month? Like, I had no idea what it was. I have a much better sense now, because after speaking with different people at different conferences, now I know, like, the average 2,000 square foot or 2,200 square foot laundromat, if you're firing on all pistons, you're going to make X amount. And I know that if I'm half that size, maybe I should be making, this amount. I also wanted to know, when I'm maxed out on revenue, what can I do to increase it? And, I had no idea. Like, the previous owners never said, don't think of this laundromat in terms of square footage. Like, if I'm 1,000 square feet, think of it as how many pounds per square foot can you handle? How many pounds a day can you handle? Because if you have bigger machines, that don't take up much more of a footprint than a 20-pound machine. You could get a 60-pound machine that's a slightly bigger footprint, but that's like 3 times the size of a 20-pound machine. So if you put all big machines in, you have a much higher square footage capacity, or pound capacity per square foot. So it's just things like that that I didn't know, that having done it for a few years, now I have a better sense in how to measure certain metrics. So yeah, nothing earth-shattering, but enough to know that I got very lucky. And the next time around, there'll just be a little more diligence, much more related to the equipment and sort of the market and what aren't we able to service versus what we could be servicing.
Yeah, I thought those were really, really great questions. I was just letting you roll on that because I thought those were really great questions that, I didn't know to ask any of those questions when I bought my first laundromat. And even when the distributor was like, okay, we're going to replace, this equipment, we'll put this in. I was like, okay. I didn't do a whole lot of research on, what kind of machine it was, soft mount, hard mount. I didn't know the difference between those. I didn't know how long the machines were going to last. All those things that you were saying, those are great, great questions to be asking, great answers to be finding during due diligence on a laundromat. So that was great.
Yeah. And I probably would have pushed them a little more like, all right, I know your tax returns are running at break even, but really, what are you guys making? And, I'm sure if I pushed a little more, I probably could have gotten a slightly more comfortable answer. But like I said, the last podcast, the water and sewage bill gave me a pretty good sense for what their revenue should be. And it was, 90 plus 95% accurate. So at least I had some comfort. But for those people listening, if you know it's a cash business and the previous owner or the seller is pretty much, running break even or a little better than break even, and you want to know really what they're doing, look at the water and sewage bill. Because I think that Laundromat Resource does have a tool where you can plug the numbers in and, it'll spit out how much revenue it should do based on how much they're charging and how much water it's using.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for shouting that out. We do have a tool. You can download it. When you log into your free account, or obviously the pro community can download it too. You got a water analysis calculator to walk you through, and it'll give you a ballpark of how much money should be coming into that laundromat. All right. I want to close it down with this. What has your vision of the future in this industry evolved at all over the last couple months since we last talked? Is your goal to just, run this laundromat and do it efficiently, have a good time, reach out to the community? Are you looking to scale, grow? Where are you at now?
Everything you just said. So,
okay.
So just to give you an example, I actually contacted a couple other laundromat owners because I wanted to buy their laundromats. So I would love to expand, but I'd like to expand within my 10-mile radius of where I live, because I feel like I want to be really hands-on for the first, months or a year or so to get the laundromats in the place that I'd like them to be before I could be a little more passive. If I only stay with this one laundromat, I'm fine with that too, but I want to maximize what I currently have, and I'm not there yet. Like I still believe that there's definitely room to grow, and there's bigger equipment I can put in, or the same equipment but just newer. And I would love if someone said, "Hey, we could do 20 laundromats within this, this whole radius." I would do that too. I don't have any preconceived ideas or notions of where I want to go in the industry, but I do feel like there's some kind of change in the air. I know very little about the industry, but it does feel like there's this sort of, I don't know if changing of the guard is the right word, but there's this newer generation of laundromat owners that are trying to bring laundromats into the next century, right? Like all of a sudden, less than a year ago, people were trying to sell me credit card swipers to install on the outside of every single machine. I'm like, why would I do that? Why wouldn't I just put an app on my phone that barely costs anything? And so it's like, there's sort of these two worlds of like the new age laundromat owner that they could be 65 years old or they could be 25 years old. But there's that sort of mindset of, I'm going to bring laundromats into the next level of technology and everything else. And then there's the fossil laundromats that have been there forever, and people are just sort of running them into the ground as hard as they can because they don't want to invest or whatever it is. And I just feel like, I think things are shifting. And because there's so many sort of old laundromats out there, it's like it's going to take time. And I would love to be part of the just acquire a bunch of laundromats, bring them into the new age, and show people that use laundromats it doesn't have to be a terrible experience. It could be a good experience. They're happy, owners are happy making money, and it's much more convenient than it used to be. So any direction, anything of those various scenarios that you presented, I could see myself going into.
Yeah, I think you're right on the new kind of age, that dawning of laundromats. I like where things are going. I think that the mindset is shifting. There's more savvy people coming in. I've said that before. And I love having conversations with people like you who are embracing that. I think that there is a contingency of people in our industry who are fighting against that. And number one, I think it's a losing battle anyways. And number two, I think all that does is slow the rest of us down, slow the perception of this industry down. And honestly, I think it costs us all a lot of money to have that perception being dominant in our industry. You know, that laundromats are old and dark and dank and all that stuff. And so everything we can do to kind of flip that on its head and show people, no, we're bringing laundromats, you know, into the next century, like you said, will benefit all of us, I think.
Right. When I find an old, dark laundromat, I'm thrilled, because that, to me, that's a huge opportunity. Buy it and turn it into the next century.
Yeah. Well, Jason, this is awesome. I love having the mom and pop perspective. I mean, we'll see how long you're going to be able to claim that mom and pop, you know, title. But at least for now, I mean, I like, you know, you're awesome just sharing, you know, everything that you've shared, the details you've shared about your business, sharing photos of what it looks like, sharing numbers, sharing what's worked for you and what hasn't worked, what products are working, what products, you know, maybe you are not working as well or haven't tried. And all of that information is just so helpful. And I think we were talking a little bit before we hit the record button too. And, you know, there's a ton of value for having some of these really big laundromat owners on and talking about how they got to where they are. Because a lot of us want to get to where they are, but a lot of us are either trying to get into the business or are at a point where we have one or two, we're basically mom and pop laundromat owners, or we're at least going to start off that way if we're not even in yet. And so having that perspective is super duper valuable, and really appreciate you coming on and sharing all that stuff twice now so far. Man, appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to share whatever I can and help any other mom and pop that's out there. And I think you said by definition, a mom and pop would be one, maybe 2, 3 locations. So I think in my immediate future, I'm definitely going to be a mom and pop. Not to mention, if you can create 1 or 2 that's spitting off a nice cash flow, then, you know, you could ride that right into retirement.
That's right. So, sounds awesome.
All right. Well, thanks. I appreciate it. And hopefully we'll do some live session at some point and really take like questions from other mom and pops.
Hey, you know what? If you're down to do a live at some point, we'll get one on the calendar. Check out laundromatresource.com/events. And, you know, we'll be sending out emails and I'll be announcing and stuff before we do that, but let's do a live and talk mom and pop laundromat ownership. That'd be great. I think a lot of people would come to that.
Sounds good.
All right. I hope you love that interview with self-proclaimed mom and pop laundromat owner, Jason Foster. Once again, bringing the good stuff to us. Hey, every week I say, let's pick one thing and put it into action, because it's the action that's going to help you achieve your goals, take you to the next level, whatever the case may be. Action's what's going to get you there, not just the learning and listening, which is good when you put it into action. So pick one thing from this week's episode. For me, I wrote down a quote that I really loved. And he said, when I'm maxed out on revenue, how can I increase it? Just having that mindset of, okay, I feel like I've plateaued, or I feel like I've gotten to where I want to go. Now, how do I take it to the next level? right? And whether that's a revenue number or whether that's how do I serve my customers better, which coincidentally will increase that revenue number, right? So that's my takeaway. What's your takeaway? Head over to the forums, laundromatresource.com/forums, and maybe go share your action takeaway this week so that we can get that action going and help us all achieve our goals. I always say it, we're all better together. Let's get some accountability going. laundromatresource.com/forums. Go share your one takeaway. All right. We'll see you next week. Peace.